Hey everybody, Ryan Grant here and welcome back to the YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be running you guys through 4 simple steps that is going to help you bulk without gaining fat. Well, obviously you will gain fat, but just minimize the amount of fat you put on. And in order to just give myself some credit that the points that I'm going to say work, this was me at the start of my bulk in August 2024 weighing 69 kilos, and then this was me at the end of my bulk in April weighing 78 kilos, and I still retained my abs and I still looked relatively lean, right? Even though I did pack on a bit of fat, I minimized it as much as I could, right? So in today's video, yeah, that's what we're going to be going over. I don't want to bore you, so let's get straight into it. So tip number 1 out of 4 is not overeating, right? I've seen online so many people think the more calories they eat, the bigger they're going to get and the more muscle they're going to grow. Yes, that is true. However, if you overeat, so for example, right, if one's maintenance calories, so the amount of calories they need to eat to stay at the same weight is 2,000 calories, which basically means that their calorie surplus in order to gain weight, they'd need to eat like 2,350 to 2,500 calories. If they then thought, oh, if I eat even more than that, I'm going to put in even more muscle, right? Then they just eat 4,000 calories a day, so almost 2 times the amount that they would need to eat to gain weight normally. If you're eating 4,000 calories a day when your maintenance is 2,000, the calories that you don't use and you don't burn off are just going to store on your body as fat. And this is why so many people get fat on their bulk. It's not necessarily because of the contents, well, that has something to do with it as well, and I'll get into that in a minute, but because they're simply just overeating, right? And I want to just put it into perspective like this. So if someone's maintenance calories is 2,000 calories, that also means that they burn 2,000 calories. So in order to stay at the same weight, one has to eat 2,000 because they also burn 2,000. However, if this person is eating 4,000, then they are eating almost double the amount that they burn. Therefore, it's going to be very hard to burn more calories to sort of level it out, if you see what I mean. So that 2,000 calories, the majority of it, at least over 1,000 of that, is going to store as fat, right? So you don't want to be in a big surplus. And as I said, one who may need to eat 2,000 calories to stay at the same weight would only need 2,350 to 2,500 to gain weight, right? So you don't want to be eating in a big surplus. So what I would highly recommend is at the absolute max, eat 500 calories in a surplus tops, right? Tops. Doesn't matter how clean your diet is, because if you don't burn those calories off and if you don't use those calories, then they're just going to store as fat. So you need to just not overeat, and it's not all about doing the most, right? It's all about doing as little as possible to get the maximal results, right? So that is step 1 out of 4 to bulking without gaining fat. Now moving on to number 2, right? You want to be smart with your diet and you want to be smart about how you do things, right? And I'm not necessarily just talking about being clean, but I'm also talking about having that balance, right? And what I mean by being smart is, for one to be disciplined, one also has to be ill-disciplined, right? And what I mean by this is, if you're eating clean 24/7 all the time, yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. However, at some point, you're going to start to kill into your cravings for something else, and then you're eventually going to go from one side of the scale, because you're so extreme over here and it's not necessarily sustainable for the long run, you're going to get smack banged all the way to the other side of the scale, which basically, this side of the scale is strict and this side of the scale is no routine and no consistency at all, right? So in order to keep the consistency, you don't want to be extreme on eating all the clean food, right? You want to sort of let go at times. Like with muscle growth, if we don't let our muscles recover, we're not going to grow, because when it's like with a phone battery, if we don't let our phone charge when it gets to 5%, then it's not going to work again because it'll be dead, right? It's just like with muscles. If we don't give them rest days and recovery days, then they're simply not going to grow, and they're going to the muscle growth process won't be able to happen. And it's the exact same thing with our diet, right? If we're not giving ourselves a break every now and then, so eating a pizza, eating a burger, eating the shit food that the pleasurable food, your vices, right? Then you're not going to be consistent in the long term. It's as simple as that, because it's simply not sustainable, right? So what I mean by being smart is having a sort of rule with your diet, right? So the two types of rules are either 80-20 or 85 to 15, right? And what this basically means is you either eat clean or you eat on plan 80 to 85% of the time, and 15 to 20% of the time you eat whatever you want, right? You just have a cheat meal, or you just have something that you feel you're craving, right? And in order to work this out, you basically just want to work out what is 80% of all the meals you eat for every day of the week. So for example, if one was to eat 4 meals every day for 7 days, then you would basically, so 4 times 7 is 28. So if you were eating 4 meals a day, that means you eat 28 meals a week. And in order to find that 80%, you basically just times 28 by 0.8. And I think that would be 22 meals. So you'd then eat 22 meals on plan out of the week. And then the remaining ones are the 20%, which is, 6 meals in that case. So you can just eat 6 meals and just, if you want to eat shit food, you can eat shit food. But it's needed, right? Staying 100% clean isn't sustainable, right? It's like if someone were to do 12-hour work days for their business, they would need some downtime, otherwise they would just mentally burn out. So that is step 2. Be smart about your diet, because in order for one to be disciplined, they also need to be ill-disciplined. So, you want to stay clean and be on plan the majority of the time. However, also just let yourself give into your vices in terms of food every now and then, right? So now moving on to the penultimate step to bulk without gaining fat, number 3, is sleep, right? So many people underestimate the importance of sleep, not just for muscle growth, and in this case, staying lean and your body's ability to burn fat, but also for your quality of life, right? And I just want to ask you this question, right? What would happen if a human just decided to never sleep again, right? And they did everything in their power to just not sleep, and they were never going to sleep again. They would eventually die, because sleep is essential to human well-being and function in life, right? However, let's flip that on its head and let's think about what would happen if a human optimized their sleep as much as possible, right? Their health and their well-being is going to be so much better, and their quality of life is going to be the best it'll possibly be, right? Therefore, if those 3 things are the consequence of looking after our sleep, then everything else we do in our day-to-day is going to get better, right? So sleep is super, super important. And in terms of minimizing fat, right? Sleep optimizes recovery. It keeps our hormones balanced, which is very important. And it also optimizes our digestive system and our digestive system's health and quality. So we're going to be able to digest foods more efficiently, and this is also going to help our metabolism stay at a good rate, which basically means that we can burn calories a lot easier when we are, despite whether we're doing physical activity or not, which basically means we're going to minimize the amount of fat we put on. So in order to optimize your sleep, make sure you're starting to go to bed at the same time every day. So for example, 10:30 p.m. Just have a half an hour window. Make sure you're getting on average 7 to 9 hours, right? And that is going to help you minimize your fat gain on a bulk, and train better, and eat better, right? It's all compounding. They all help each other, right? So that is step 3 out of 4 for how to bulk without gaining fat, optimizing your sleep. It is super, super important, right? So now on to the final step, number 4 out of 4. And this is very simple, but it's the simple things that get you the furthest, right? Consistency with training, right? I mean, obviously we need to stay consistent with training, because if we're eating all this food and we're not actually putting the calories to work, then as I said earlier, if we don't burn the calories we've just eaten off, then they're just going to store as fat. In other words, if we're not training and keeping ourselves active, if we're just eating a lot of food, that's not going to help us gain muscle or gain the fat off, and we're just going to get fat, right? So just make sure you're staying consistent with your training, as that is super, super important. So in order to do this to the best ability, you want to be progressive overloading in your sessions. So this basically just means increasing the difficulty of your sessions. So if a weight starts to feel easy, increase the weight, or get 1 rep better than last week, for example, and make sure you're training harder than last time. So yeah, basically just pushing your limits. That is going to help you burn more calories, keep your metabolic rate at a good rate, which basically, as I said a minute ago, means that you're going to be able to burn calories easier whether you're at physical activity or rest, which is going to help you keep fat off, right? So that is basically the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope you can take away some tips and tricks from these 4 steps. If you do want my help beyond these YouTube videos, I do have a free community that's going to be the top link in the description, where specifically we help men who struggle with weight and muscle gain break free from those struggles by me teaching them the fundamentals that helped me gain over 27 kilos, as you can see right here, over the past 4 years. So if you want my help, and if you are struggling, you know, and if you want to further minimize the amount of fat that you gain on your bulk, make sure you join the community, and I'd absolutely love to have you as the newest member. However, if you just want to stay on the YouTube channel, then that is no problem with me. If you did enjoy, make sure you drop a like, make sure you leave a comment down below if any steps stood out to you, and that would obviously really help the algorithm and stuff. And if you want to stay around, maybe, you know, hit that button down there. I upload every Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, so don't worry, I will make sure your subscription is of value. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Have a good day. See you later.